Before we begin, I feel like I should explain my relationship with this book, because it goes back. Back when I was a mere freshman in high school, I read The Hunger Games, and that sort of spurred on kind of a refresh of my love for reading, because I read a lot when I was growing up, and then I kind of stopped for a little while there, and I think it's partially because the books we were reading in school I found kind of boring. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy some of the classics, but I really don't think that a baby teenager is going to fully appreciate the Scarlet Letter, you know what I mean? And so I wasn't reading for fun a lot at that point. And then I read The Hunger Games right before those movies were going to come out, and I was genuinely so obsessed. And I feel like that is what got me into reading again. And then I read this book directly after. And I feel like this is what got me into writing again. I feel like I can't explain the level of fangirl that I achieved. Different person unlocked. And I wrote so much fan fiction, you guys, so much fan fiction. I rewrote this entire book and all of Allegiant from FourTris perspective because I was so obsessed. I literally couldn't leave it alone. I couldn't move on from this book. I would just keep rereading it a couple times before I finally moved on to things like Maze Runner and Legend and stuff like that. I was very much stuck on this book. This is, I feel like rereading it now. I'm 28. So rereading it now, when I listen to Tris's inner monologue and stuff, it sounds obviously young to me. This is a young adult book. It feels like a 16-year-old brain. But when I was reading this in like that age range, I have never felt more connected and understood by a character in my life than I did with Tris. And I don't think I've connected with a character that way again. Like, she's very special to me. And as much as I love Peta, I feel like if we're going to talk about book boyfriends, Four was also my first book boyfriend. And like when they came out with the cast, listen, I wanted Dylan O'Brien to play Four so bad. Or what's his name? The brunette guy from Hannah Montana's special. You know what I mean? I feel like his name is Drew. Then they cast Theo James. Now listen, I love him. When I was a child, like obviously, so they aged up the characters in the movie a bit as they had to because they cast actors way too old for those roles. Not that they look old, they just don't look like teenagers. Especially Theo James. I think he was 32 when they made that movie. And at the time, I did not understand. Now I get it. But like... And so when I was reading this, I was actually having a really hard time separating out Mental Four and Theo James in this case. Everyone else was fine except for Peter, who I do now hear as Miles Teller. What an interesting cast for them to pick. This is, by the way, if you're looking at this, the collector's edition that I absolutely had to have. It says, "Be brave, V. Roth" here. And then I went to Y'all Fest several years ago and then got her to sign it officially, and it says, "Caitlin, be brave." And her signature. And when I tell you, like, I wanted to, I don't know, somehow thank her for writing this book. Like, it really did mean so much to me when I read it, especially the first time through. And then I proceeded to reread this book pretty much every year for a very long time. But when I got to her table and had her sign it, I think I just mumbled something about like how much I love her books. And I physically couldn't speak to her. The year I was a volunteer at Y'all Fest, I did get to sort her name tag. I was so excited. If you are here and you don't know what Divergent is about and you have somehow managed to avoid this book for the past like 12, 13 years. This book follows Beatrice Prior, who is turning 16 in a futuristic Chicago where everyone is split into 5 factions based on the characteristic they value most between kindness, selflessness, bravery, honesty, and intelligence. Our main character, Beatrice Prior, is in the selfless faction at the beginning of the book, and she has to decide where she wants to go to live the rest of her life because you get to choose when you're 16. Well before your frontal lobe develops, can't see how anything could possibly go wrong. This is the first book of a trilogy. In my opinion, of the 3, this is probably the best one. Like, this is definitely my favorite by far. I am amongst the minority of people who enjoy the whole trilogy. I don't want to spoil anything. I know a lot of people have their issues with the last book, and I understand why. But for me personally, I do like the entire trilogy. We have many a tab to discuss, so I am going to dive into it. If you have not read this book, you need to exit. If you've seen the movie, listen to me now. The movie I have made my peace with, but Upon its first arrival, after watching the masterpiece that was The Hunger Games, and then they released Divergent very shortly after, I was expecting Hunger Games level mastery, Hunger Games level exactness. Because to me, they took those books and made a movie that was exactly what I imagined while reading the books. Divergent, that did not happen. I like the movies now. Like, I think a couple months ago, I went and just watched all the clips that I could find on YouTube because I wanted to kind of just revisit the world, and I think now I enjoy it in that way. But for a very long time, I had a hard time accepting the movie. I saw Insurgent. I have not seen Allegiant because I feel like it did go quite off the rails. But if you've seen the movie, you did miss quite a lot that was in the book. And I feel like the movie doesn't fully properly portray the themes of the story, really. I feel like the plot is there, and because of that, most of the theme is, kind of went along with it, but I think it misses a lot of the heart of what this story actually is. So if you've only seen the movie, go read the book and then come back and discuss. I promise it's worth it. It's so wonderful. Goodbye to non-spoiler people. So we open up on Aptitude test day. And I feel like when I was first reading this through, obviously, Tris makes such a huge point multiple times to tell us how perfect Caleb is at being Abnegation that I just never really picked up on these things. When Caleb's asking, like, aren't you worried about what the test is going to tell you? And Tris is lying. She's like, no, like, they don't have to change their choices, because it's just kind of an unspoken thing in faction families that you are sort of expected to stay with your family and value what they value. And transferring to another faction is seen as essentially betrayal to your family and your faction. And so at that point, you're allowed to visit people in other factions, but it's like never the same for them. That's how strong their allegiances are. And I feel like Tris is like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to choose. But then we go to the next page and she's watching the Dauntless jump off the train. She's like, I watch them every single day. And I'm like, wonder who we're picking. We have the test, and obviously Tris gets her Divergent result. Tori explains to us that each part of the test is supposed to rule out a faction until you're left with just one, but she ended up having Erudite, Abnegation, and Dauntless. By the way, how do you say Erudite? Because I say it like that, but I know that everybody has their own pronunciation. And when I was first reading it, I thought it was Erudite, because I'd never seen that word until like a year later when it popped up in my like vocab book, if you ever had to do that in school, and people were saying erudite, and I was like, I beg your pardon. Now, Caleb asks Tris about her test because he knows that she left and was sick, because Tori was going to record her results separately and she sent her home. And still, like, she hears the train horn with the Dauntless and she's like, it feels like the Dauntless calling me to them. I feel like Tris spent so much time wrestling over this decision, and I understand she didn't want to leave her family, but at the same time I was like, it's very clear to us as the reader what's going to be happening. And she talks about how it's her turn to cook dinner, but then Caleb comes and helps her, and she says, what irritates me most about him is his natural goodness, his inborn selflessness, which kind of made me wonder when I was reading some of this back. I was like, is Caleb Divergent? I feel like that would have come up, you know what I mean? But is he just smart, and because he's smart he's a good actor, or is he Divergent in that he has both Abnegation and Erudite tendencies? We get a first mention of Tobias. So Erudite is releasing all of those reports about Abnegation being a corrupt government because they're the only faction that really runs everything, because theoretically being selfless makes you a good leader. But they released a report about Marcus and the fact that his son left for Dauntless because he was abusing him. Beatrice's father cannot fathom this, and neither can she. Like, it with their faction's ideals, that makes absolutely no sense. And it's really clear in such a short amount of time how her parents view this. So she says, cruel Marcus, my mother shakes her head, that poor man, as if he needs to be reminded of his loss. Of his son's betrayal, you mean, my father says coldly. And it's moments like this that really cement in her mind that if she leaves her faction, her dad is not going to forgive her. And then of course we get a little bit of foreshadowing from Caleb when they're about to go to bed for the night. And she's like, the tests don't have to change her choices. And Caleb says, don't they though? Which is why I think, like, yes, part of me was like, is he actually Divergent and we just never found out? Or did he truly think he was going to get an Abnegation result, and then he got Erudite and now he's like kind of rethinking his entire life? So Beatrice doesn't realize it early in the book, but her mom is like super intuitive, and I feel like it's very clear throughout the story that her mom knows her better than she knows her mom, clearly, because when her mom comes up to her and she's like, I love you no matter what, Tris is like, oh my gosh, like she knows what I'm gonna pick. And I just feel like this is a lot of pressure to put on a 16-year-old. Can you imagine? Like, you're not allowed to tell your family what you're going to be doing. I don't know if it's a law, but you're not supposed to tell people what faction you're gonna pick until you go up there and like slice your hand and drop your blood in the bowl. And I just feel like that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. But when she does it, she thinks to herself, I am selfish, I am brave. And I feel like a big theme in this book is that all of the characters of the factions, they're not at war with one another. They are meant to coincide. And we figure out more about like how the factions were formed and stuff in the later books, and why people kind of think that being selfless and being brave cannot coincide within a person. But something that I like that Tris learns from 4 is he makes it a very specific point to say that being selfless and brave aren't really all that different, and something that fuels Tris throughout the entire book. She finds herself being her bravest when she is acting on behalf of other people. I've always loved the little note when after she and Caleb pick, so both of them are transfers and their dad is pissed. And so he's like glaring at her on her way out. She can't even say goodbye. Like this is, it's like the Hunger Games when they're shipping Katniss off and she doesn't get to say goodbye to people. I'm like, this is like actually wild. They're 16 years old. They're little babies. But next to her dad, her mom is just like smiling at her. I forgot how brutal this book actually is. So when we're going to Dauntless compound for the first time, we're on the train. We make it on there, barely. That one kid, he is running after the train trying to get on. He's from Amity. And he can't run fast enough to get on the train, and he within literally like minutes of picking his new faction is out of the running to be an initiate because he couldn't get on the train. And I was just like, this is actually so upsetting because of how easy it is to lose at initiation, at least in Dauntless. I feel like the other factions are pretty much like, yep, you chose us, go do your community service, go pick apples from trees and you'll be in 30 days. But with Dauntless, it's very, very intense. And then they jump off the train onto the buildings, and there's that one girl, the Dauntless born, who misses the top of the building. So my understanding is that they never have let the 16-year-olds through the back entrance before. They've only ever used the entrance at the glass building because one of the girls completely missed the building and died. Part of me was a little upset that I did go and rewatch a lot of those Divergent clips right before reading this. Like, I think I watched them, it's probably been like a month or whatever. But when she's up there and Tris has decided, she's like, I'm gonna be the first one to jump off this building. She goes and she takes off her like Abnegation gray jacket, and we hear Peter behind us. Ooh, scandalous. A stiff's flashing some skin. And I could not unhear Miles Teller in my brain. Yeah, stiff, take it off.
Put it back on.
It's just so funny the way that he portrayed Peter. Trish jumps off the building, she lands in the net, she rolls away from the middle of the net and gets caught by someone. And this someone is 4. I roll off and I would have fallen face first onto a wood floor if he had not caught me. He is the young man attached to the hand I grabbed. And I was like, I just loved it. Like, I had so many fangirly feels come back rereading this book. It's been genuinely so long. Like, I wish I could remember the last time I actually read through this book all the way. I think I was probably 19. I was like, it's been so long since I've seen you. 4 sets his hand on my back and says, welcome to Dauntless, after she picks her name. And when he said that, like, I just literally, you know how, like, it's hard to explain. You know, like when you want to go visit a book, or like you're so familiar with a book that it feels like a real place to you, sort of. And when he said that line, I felt like just all of the good feels come back from reading this book. I know that this book isn't necessarily like a happy book, but just like all the flood of memories of this book, just it was so wonderful. And I was like, we're back at Dauntless. Like, it was so nice. This is a point that we never come back to. Are there any old Dauntless? Do they not last that long? Or are they just sent away when they can't jump off moving trains anymore? Which is fair. At 28 years old, I feel like jumping on and off trains is maybe not even good for my health now. Like, let alone, like, I don't think we see any 60, 70, 80-year-old Dauntless. And I'm like, this is a fair question that no one ever answers. I don't think we get an answer the entire series. And if you remember, please let me know in the comments, because as soon as she said that, I was like, wait a second. The oldest Dauntless we see by name is probably Tori, and I think she's like late 30s, early 40s. Anytime that Tris was sassy, I absolutely loved it. She asks for where you would transfer to. I thought I would only have trouble with the Candor asking too many questions, he says coldly. Now I've got stiffs too? It must be because you're so approachable. This part actually, like, it made me sad for Tris, and I think it's supposed to highlight the fact that dedicating your life to just one character trait is not good. They tell the initiates that, you know, after training you're allowed to do whatever you like, and Tris says the phrase do whatever you like sticks in my mind. At home I could never do what I wanted, not even for an evening. I had to think of other people's needs first. I don't even know what I like to do. And that was just like, it's really upsetting. Like, it really struck me this read around where I was like, that is so intense. Like, they're so dedicated to this mission of selflessness that she doesn't even know a lot of really important things about herself. Another thing that struck me this read around, only 10 initiates are made members out of all their, so I think we started off with like 19, 20 something, and it's not the fact that they cut it in half, it's the fact that it's only 10. I'm like, y'all must have the smallest faction, because I think my understanding was that Abnegation is the smallest faction, maybe not, but Dauntless has to be tiny. If they only take 10 new members a year and we don't see any Dauntless older than 40, realistically. So like, we know that their history doesn't go back super long, like this futuristic Chicago. So they might have started off with a lot of people, and we know that overall their society is not super large generally. But if we think about that for just a minute, they take 10 every single year, and the oldest person we know is 40. That would be 100 for every decade if they only take 10. That would be 340 people, plus the 20 initiates, plus however many kids there are that are under 16. But given that, like, the adults are not that old, there wouldn't be that many kids. And so I'm like, this faction is probably less than 1,000 people. You should be taking every single person you can get. Like, what do you mean 10? And then somebody like freaks out, and Eric's like, if you knew, would you have chosen differently? Yes, I'd go pick apples with the Amity, thank you very much, if I knew my chances of getting into a faction were 50% or less. We all sleep in the same room. At least the transfers have to sleep in the same room in the bunk bed situation. And she makes a note, first of all, that Al is crying, which, first of all, like, absolutely not. If I needed to cry about that situation, I would, first of all, need to be alone. Second of all, other people crying kind of makes me cry. And so I would not do well in this situation. Tris is holding it together pretty good. And then she says, his feet are just inches from my head. If the crying wasn't enough, that would be my last straw. Absolutely not. What do you mean his feet are that close to your face? No. Thinking back, this is now like starting to marinate in my mind. If we really only had 1,000 Dauntless, how many people are actually in the other factions? And Christina is asking, because they're trying to figure out if they had classes together. I'm like, would you not recognize one another if there were really only like, I don't know, like 1,000 at most students in your school, like in your grade? And Christina, she says, I asked if you remember ever taking a class with me. I mean, no offense, but I probably wouldn't remember if you did. All the Abnegation look the same to me. Because they really are supposed to always be projecting outward. So it makes sense for her not to remember Tris, but I feel like you would remember Christina. And she even says, she's talking to Al, and she's like, we were in math together a few days ago, and I am not a quiet person. I thought it was so cute because their behavior is so dictated by their previous faction. It comes down to even their little nuances in action and stuff like that. And she sees Edward and Myra kiss at a table, like kind of close to them. And Tris is like, oh my gosh, like, why are they so public? And Christina says, your abnegation is showing. And I thought that was really cute. Like, I like little mentions like that when they kind of point out each other's faction in them. Al decides that he's going to be getting a tattoo. And I was like, I think the only thing that really rattles me when I'm doing these rereads of books that I read so long ago is like how young the characters are. Like, don't get a tattoo. You're 16, don't get a tattoo. You're not gonna like it. When I look at my Pinterest board of tattoos that I made when I was 16, I'm so glad I didn't get any of them. I still want like bookish tattoos, but not the ones I picked out as a child. Tris ends up getting her 3 flying bird tattoos for her family. And while she's there, she tells Tori, like, I need to talk to you, but it's so hard for them to find time to talk, / like, Tori doesn't know all that much. Like, she's the one who erased Tris's test results because her own brother had been divergent and killed for it. But such a frustrating point of so much of the book for Tris is knowing that she's divergent, but not knowing what it means, first of all. And second of all, not knowing how to hide it. Because it even takes us a long time to figure out, like, how she can manipulate the different simulations and stuff like that, and that being a signal of divergence. I love Christina. She's talking about, like Peter and Molly and them. And she said, they already know I hate them. And Tris is like, how? And she's like, because I've told them. Like, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world, which it is for a Candor. And Tris is like, we weren't supposed to hurt people. Like, I never would have told someone I don't like them. And Christina says, I like to think I'm helping them by hating them. I'm reminding them that they aren't God's gift to humankind. There's so many little things Christina said that I thought were so funny. We get a really good scene when they're talking about fighting, and we really see the differences between the types of Dauntless that there are. Because Eric says that, you know, the old rules used to let people concede, but the new rules, you have to fight each other until one of you cannot physically keep going. And Four says, a brave man acknowledges the strength of others, and Eric says, a brave man never surrenders. And so we get a really good, clear picture of the two types of bravery that there are and that exist within the Dauntless faction. But unfortunately, Eric has all the authority in this situation. Sometimes I just thought Triss's descriptions of things were so funny. She's talking about Will and Al fighting, and one of them, they're friends, but one of them has to knock the other one out. And she said, when I was younger, I read a book about grizzly bears. There was a picture of one standing on its hind legs with its paws outstretched, roaring. That is how Al looks now. Christina ends up fighting Molly, and then she decides that she is not going to continue with the fight because she's bleeding and really injured, and Eric is upset about it, and so he makes her hang over the chasm because unfortunately Four has left, and he's our only safeguard to sanity against Eric. And so Christina's hanging by the railing over the chasm. Reminder that these children are 16. She is hanging on by her fingertips. It's slippery. There's the water from the chasm is all over the place. Which, listen, we can talk about the movie on a different day, but this part of the movie made me so mad. There was no water. They just had her hanging over the thing. And I was like, it looked like an unfinished set. And there was I was imagining this massive waterfall in the middle of the Dauntless compound, and there was absolutely nothing of the sort. And then I think something that we see over and over with Al's character is that he's really not cut out for the Dauntless lifestyle, and he is theoretically the least brave of pretty much everyone other than maybe Myra. He's consistently going to have the lowest ranking, but in this case, Triss really wants to speak up and cheer Christina on or help her in some way, and she's not the one who speaks up, it's Al, which is its kind of own form of bravery there with going against Eric. And I feel like that's something I noticed in this reread was just the amount of times we see the different types of bravery coming from different people in the faction. But he cheers Christina on, and then Triss joins in. And this whole time she's having this mental battle of if Christina starts to fall, do I go and get her? First of all, can I do any good? Triss is 90 pounds soaking wet. She might not be able to help at all, and then Eric would be mad at her, and it would just put her in a worse place and would not help Christina either way. Or is she willing to be selfless enough to help Christina back up, knowing that Eric might kick both of them out of Dauntless? Luckily, it doesn't really come down to that at all. The next day, somebody has spray painted stiff across Triss's bunk. I completely forgot that this happened, but it's very obvious to us that Peter's the one who did it, and he just has had it out for Triss from the very beginning. And when I say it out loud, I kind of don't understand why. He's just mean, but he seems extra mean to Triss. And maybe it's because she's from Abnegation, he believes all of the Erudite reports or whatever, but at that point, Triss poses absolutely no threat to him, and I just don't understand why he was so freaking mean. He just is naturally mean. Triss gets paired up with Peter for her fight, and I feel like this is fair. Al and Christina are trying to not coach her, but kind of coach her. They're take a few hits, fall down, act like you can't get back up, all this stuff. And she's they're just trying to help. But the fact that they don't believe, not even in a tiny corner of their minds, that I have a chance against Peter bothers me. And I was first of all, I understand that sentiment. Second of all, you don't stand a chance against Peter. I appreciate the internal fight, but it's just, at this point in the book, she was not prepared whatsoever. I thought it was funny. She gets knocked out by Peter, ends up in the infirmary, and Will, Al, and Christina come to see her, and she is talking to Christina. She's what happened to your face? And she's look who's talking. And she's well, I already know what happened to my face. And then Will is did you just make a joke? We should get you painkillers more often. The next day, we're supposed to go to the train tracks for a field trip. We're supposed to be there at 8:15. Christina wakes Triss up at 8 o'clock. That is not a friend. I'm sorry. If somebody woke me up with 15 minutes before I'm supposed to be outside fully dressed somewhere else, that's not going to be happening for me. We're on our way to go see the Amity fields or whatever. It's where the Dauntless guard. And on the way there, Christina asks Will, Will knows where we're going. And Christina's did you memorize a map of the city for fun? And he's yeah, didn't you? And I like little moments like this where I feel it's kind of hinted at that everyone has a bit of divergence in them. Spoiler for the rest of the series, but kind of, I would say it's a spoiler. So mute if you need to. But by the end of the series, we find out that the whole point is that all of us, the readers, we're all divergent because we have all of the characteristics in us. And it's our job to find out how to use all of them. All kindness, being intelligent, being honest with one another. How we're supposed to use all these things together. But in this society, they're all very much separated out into their individual characteristics. That's part of the problem. But But even though Tris is our special chosen one who is divergent and that shows up on the test, everyone around her is like a little bit divergent because they still act like their old faction and their new faction. We even see it in Uriah. It's not like he's just brave, he's also kind to Tris. We find out when we're at the fence that 4 was first in his initiate class. I love that he just stares Peter down while he says this too. Just a little bit of putting him in his place, which I appreciate. We're about to get back on the train, and 4 kind of like is chastising her a bit for going and talking to Robert, her old neighbor, who is now Amity. And she gets frustrated with him and kind of snaps at him like, why do you care? You couldn't even wait around to watch my fight. He's like, it's something I didn't want to see. And she's like, what's that supposed to mean? I was like, Tris, my sweet baby Tris, he likes you a lot. It took her a very long time to catch on to that fact. We have fighting day 2. She fights against Myra. Myra can't hold her own against a butterfly, sweet thing. But Tris wins that fight. We go to play capture the flag. And I loved this scene so much. I've always enjoyed this part of the book. Also, weirdly enough, the first night of me going to college, they had a giant game of capture the flag. I was like, it's happening. No paintballs for us, but it was still fun. We start by choosing the teams, and 4 picks Tris first. And I love it. They go to Navy Pier, which I still want to go to. I've never been to Chicago, but I can't wait to go at some point. Just see all of the things that are mentioned in the book. But they go to the pier, they see the Ferris wheel, and Will says, think about it, people used to ride this thing for fun. And then Tris goes, they must have been dauntless. Tris decides that she's going to go climb the Ferris wheel. I don't know why I've always liked this line, but I just really always liked it when she's about to climb the thing and she says, will I really risk my life for this to win a game the Dauntless like to play? I don't know why. I think it's just like the rhythm of it. Like this book to me has a lot of, it's short sentences, but it has a lot of rhythm to the writing, which is something I've always really liked. It's a sort of tempo that like on my end of trying to write things, I've always tried to like kind of mimic that. And find that sort of, I don't know how to explain it, just like a tempo to the writing. If you understand, please let me know. Or is it just me and I'm crazy? Could be. One of my favorite lines. They're going up the Ferris wheel. 4 is right on her heels, even though he is scared to death of heights. And she looks down and she's like, are you all right for it? And he says, are you human, Tris? Being up this high doesn't scare you at all. We see a lot of moments where Tris is showing different parts of the factions very clearly. And this is one of her Dauntless ones where she says, I look over my shoulder at the ground. If I fall now, I will die, but I don't think I will fall. And it's just that surety in her that she's not at all scared until she sort of gets swept to the side by the wind and 4 saves her. And it's a very cute moment. I do like that part. They get to the middle. I was like, did nobody think ahead? They get to the middle of the Ferris wheel and she looks out because she's trying to climb so she can see the other team's flag. And so she looks out and she realizes there's still a building in front of her and she can't see over it. So she has to climb up more. And I was like, why didn't we anticipate this from the beginning? You're part erudite. And so she keeps climbing, but then like a part of the wheel breaks off and she's just like dangling from the Ferris wheel. And 4 has to go and turn on the Ferris wheel. And he says, he's like, I took a risk. I hope that it would work. I hope that it would save you. And I was like, I'm so surprised. Like, I would not trust that Ferris wheel to work. Like, it's been hundreds of years since it's moved. Have you ever left batteries in something for too long? They get like covered in goop. Like, but then again, I did turn on my Wii for the first time in like years recently. And I know that I did not expect that thing to turn on, but it pulled up Wii Sports Resort like we had picked off and I had not left it alone before. So maybe it's like that. Because we're not actually shooting one another, we have the paintballs and Tris is talking about people shooting the paintballs at each other. And listen, I've gone paintballing one time in my life and I did not think it was going to hurt the way it did. I'll tell you, me and my husband show up to this and it's apparently paintball mastery day. Like all these people who do paintball professionally or like semi-professionally have shown up for this day of paintball. We have a Groupon. And I want to turn around and go home, but we end up playing with them instead. And I was like, this is great. This is fine. I'm not scared at all. I'm standing next to this guy who's probably played paintball for like 30 years. And he's like, getting hit by a paintball doesn't hurt unless you get hit in the knuckle. And that's gonna hurt. Guess who got hit in the knuckle? Extreme pain. So I felt more like inclined to feel bad for these people in this book. So also, I don't know if it just didn't bother me or if I was just too distracted by 4 the first time I was reading this book. But like Christina, I don't know if she's like a good friend, like, or if it's just like a Candor thing, but this was the first of many times when I felt like Christina wasn't, I don't know, being a good friend to Tris. They get to the flag. Tris has done all the work to make sure they get to the flag, but then Christina takes the flag and she's like, come on, Tris, you're already the hero of the day and you know you can't reach it anyway. And so she decides that means that she should be the one to get the flag and move forward. And there are so many times like that where, I don't know, like there were just things she would do and say that I was like, and even Tris back to Christina, I was like, y'all are not being good friends to one another, like at all. We have the knife throwing scene. Let me tell you, when Veronica Roth released that little, like, we have the full story, the book, but when she released originally that first scene, and it's this scene when he's throwing knives at Tris's head, I lost my mind, I tell you. That her releasing those couple pages from Four's perspective is the entire reason I ended up writing 2 books worth of fan fiction from his perspective, because I was like, you gave us one scene and not the rest, and so I was like, fine, I'll do it. I loved hearing this scene from his perspective because obviously he's already figured out that Tris is at her most brave when she's acting for other people. So when Tris takes Al's place because Al was doing bad at throwing the knives and Eric was going to make him stand in front of the target and get knives thrown at him, and Al is obviously very scared of this. He generally is a bit of a scaredy cat. But to be fair, I would not want to stand in front of a target either. And so Tris does it for him. And in Four's brain, we know that he wants Eric to not have a target on Tris. And so kind of to circumnavigate that, he decides that he's going to nick her ear with one of the knives, which first of all shows how incredibly precise he is. And also that, you know, he's making fun of Tris, and that's what it feels like from her end, but he's just kind of taunting her in a way that reminds her if she leaves, then Al's going to have to take her place, and she doesn't want that overall. And so he purposefully hits her with the knife, and Tris is very mad about that situation, and she snaps at Four after everyone has left. And she's like, why should I thank you? Because Four's like, you should thank me for what I just did. And he says, you know, I'm getting a little tired of waiting for you to catch on. And I was like, me too, Tris. Has it never occurred to you that he might like you, considering how closely he keeps tabs on you? He leaves because he's upset that Tris is not catching on to anything yet. He crosses the room and slams the point of a knife so hard into the table that it sticks there, handle toward the ceiling. That is mahogany. We get to chapter 14, and she has now gained muscle from Dauntless training, and I thought it was so funny. There were so many reasons that I feel like I kind of resonate with Tris, and even this scene was one of them. Like, if you've ever started training hard in, I did sports growing up, and there was one summer where I really started training hard and weightlifting and stuff like that, and I remember so clearly, clothes that had fit me 3 months prior, I was trying to put them on, and I physically couldn't get them over my thighs, and then Tris having the exact same experience. It was just we are the same person. Even her thoughts, they were just all the same. This part absolutely killed me. I feel like it's so cruel. She goes to take a shower, she comes back, and she realized that she didn't have her clothes or something like that. And then while she's in there trying to get dressed, Peter pulls the towel off her. I'm like, this is should get you banned from a faction type of behavior. Genuinely. He has done so much at this point. And they're laughing at her because she's just a little teeny baby Tris. And I feel so bad for her. You feel the emotion. She says that she leans against the door breathing hard. I close my eyes. It doesn't matter. I don't care. And she still starts crying. I was like, oh, my poor baby. I'm so sorry. But that gives her the fuel that she needs to go in and fight Molly hard. She beats her up. And it's really satisfying to the point that Four has to pull her off of Molly. And she's so different in this fight that she even notes that Four looks alarmed. And he's like, you should go take a walk. And she says that she's fine. And she says, I wish I could feel guilty for what I did. I don't. And I think that's her trying to be the abnegation part of her is not there, at least at this moment. And I'm like, no, honestly, right on. I think if somebody did something like that to me, I think beating them up is justified. We have family day, and it's really sad. Tris is very upset that her dad didn't come to see her. Her mom is there, and it's really, I feel even worse for Caleb because the Erudite hate abnegation so much right now. They're not even letting them go into the compound. She can't go see Caleb today. And so she comes and sees Tris instead. But Tris doesn't know that yet. And she asks, is Dad visiting Caleb? And her mom says, your father had to be at work. And Tris is like, I know what that means. You can tell me he didn't want to come. And she says, your father has been selfish lately. That doesn't mean he doesn't love you. I promise. And then Tris is like, my mom calling my dad selfish? They must be fighting. That is really intense for her. I love her mom meeting Four. He comes in, shakes hands with her and says, your daughter's doing a good job. Tris had said, there's one of my instructors. He's kind of intimidating. And her mom is like, he's handsome. And I'm like, yep. That's so sad. Her mom doesn't even know that she ends up with him. She doesn't even have time to tell her, which is really upsetting now that I'm thinking about it. Now, her mom asks her what were her aptitude test results. And Tris is like, I shouldn't tell anybody, but like, this is my mom. And she ends up telling her. Her mom says to stay in the middle of the pack to kind of like not draw attention to herself. And Tris is like freaking out. She's like, why are you like, what are you not telling me about this? And then her mom is like, I don't have time. Go talk to Caleb because Abnegation aren't allowed to go see the Erudite right now, and ask him to research the simulation serum. And it's like a really rushed conversation, but by the end of it, like when her mom's, I loved it so much. When her mom is leaving, she's like, have a piece of the cake for me, the chocolate, it's delicious. And that, like, this is a food that only the Dauntless eat, apparently. And so that's like a very automatic clue that her mother started out as Dauntless and transferred into Abnegation. And I thought it was like kind of crazy that she doesn't know that about her mom. Like maybe it's just like once you're in a faction, like you really just never talk about your old faction or something like that. I just feel like that's such a piece of lore that she would need to know about her family. But I think part of it is that like when we see Tris at the dinner table with her family in Abnegation, it's not even like she's allowed to ask questions. Their conversations aren't really conversations. It's more of like they're allowed to share, but they don't probe one another for questions. Like they don't ask anything. And so maybe that's why, like she just never thought to ask. Like she was so sure that her mom was from Abnegation. I feel bad for Al. Like it was overall, when he liked Tris, it felt a little annoying because I was like, ugh, like I just want us to go hang out with Four. And the thing is, with this, I was like, Tris, how can you tell that Al likes you, but you can't tell that Four likes you? Like, it has to occur to you, girl. But Al kind of like makes a bit of a move and she rejects it. And she's like, I wish I was wrong about his feelings for me. Like I had suspected this, but I wish that I had been wrong. And I feel really bad for Al at the point, because he's already had such a hard time in Dauntless so far. Like it's very clear this does not match with his personality, which is interesting because like, what did he get on his aptitude test? You know what I mean? Like partly I feel like this is a flawed system, because what if you just happen to choose the knife in the aptitude test, but you're not meant to be in Dauntless? You know what I mean? And we talk about the test later when Christina is mentioning like she had a dog growing up and she's like, I don't think I can get a dog again, you know, after the test. And Tris is like, oh right, every other person in this room picked up the knife when they went through their test and I didn't. And so she's kind of like trying to play it off, but because Christina's from Candor, she knows that Tris is lying, and Tris tells her friends that she got abnegation, which is technically true because that's what Tori recorded it as, but obviously she can't tell, especially like in this giant cafeteria where everybody can hear you. She can't say anything about being divergent. So we get our first round of rankings, and Tris is 6th and Edward is 1st, and Peter cannot handle that. So that night, like in the middle of the night, they wake up to absolute screaming, and this is when Peter has stabbed Edward in the eye with a butter knife. And that is unhinged behavior. I don't care about like the fact that you're dauntless. That is not a brave move. That is psychotic. It wasn't even like a sharp knife. He used a butter knife that he smuggled out of the cafeteria somehow. Edward quits, which I feel like is understandable, and Myra follows after him. She wasn't going to make it anyway. They're in love, and so they just leave. I love the zipline scene. I've always thought it was really sweet. Like, it's nice to hang out with the Dauntless borns a little bit to kind of see like their side of it. And she even starts to understand what Dauntless, I think, is what it's meant to be. Like what Four talks about when he talks about what he thinks the Dauntless faction should act like. And they go and they do the zipline, and she says, I know why my father said the Dauntless were a pack of madmen. He couldn't understand the kind of camaraderie that forms only after you've all risked your lives together. And it's just like such a nice moment, because there's very few things that she gets to do that are characteristic of the Dauntless that are just fun, because Dauntless training isn't really fun. It's very much a characteristic of their faction, but beating other people up and learning how to fight is not really anybody is gonna enjoy that the way they would a zipline situation. I did feel bad that she didn't really get Christina and Will, but at this point, they were kind of like, I don't know, they were kind of weird after the rankings came out, everybody was. Tris had gone and like, I think she went off by herself, right? She went off by herself after cleaning up all of Edward's blood, which impressed that she did that. And so Uriah came and kind of picked her up. And that's a thing that like happens over and over again, is that her transfer friends are sort of there for her when she is in her weakest moments, and then the Dauntless born, they're there to more pick her up and push her forward when she's like up, if that makes sense. And I don't know if there was any really purpose to that necessarily, but when she comes back, there's a clear tension with her friends when she's like, oh yeah, I went with the Dauntless borns to do this cool thing while y'all hung out here the whole day. And she's trying to kind of cover up for it because Al is like, oh, you missed out. Christina almost punched an Erudite. They came and asked about the Abnegation leadership. And here's the thing. Christina, I think, is her friend because she was basically standing up for the Abnegation when most people wouldn't do that. But she knows that Tris is from there. And Will says that the reporter got testy with her. Big mistake. And Tris is like, huge, I say, nodding. If I smile enough, maybe I can make them forget their jealousy or hurt or whatever is brewing behind Christina's eyes. And then Christina's saying, while you were off having fun, we were doing the dirty work of defending your old faction. And it's little things like that where she's not mad, but they're not like, I don't know, they have a hard time meshing at some points. And I think that's, true to life. It's not like they have had years of friendship behind them and everyone's sort of thrown together in this situation. And you maybe become friends with someone that you wouldn't have originally. But it was moments like that where I was like, dang, I kind of didn't remember Christina being like that. But it doesn't really matter because we head into stage 2 of initiation. We're all sitting in the hallway and people are going one at a time into this room. We're with the Dauntless ones now, and Will is talking to Uriah. He's like, don't you think it's unfair that you know what's happening in initiation, that gives you an advantage? And I kind of like that Uriah is just straight up, he's like, wouldn't you use an advantage? What kind of question is that? And I thought that was fair, but he does say stage 2, nobody can prepare you for it. But he doesn't say anything about knowing what the simulations are. So it's not I don't know. I feel like they would know. They would know that it's going to be simulations. Somebody's older sibling would have talked about it. Nobody's going to keep that secret. But it's not like they've gone through a simulation before except for the aptitude test, as far as I understand. I feel like I didn't remember how many times we get an injection in the side of the neck. That makes my skin crawl. Four is there and he's saying this is basically you facing your fear going into a simulation. The birds, it's so gross. This scene is so well described that I feel like I know exactly what it felt like. I'm not even scared of birds really, but the way she's talking about it, I feel the edge of its sharp beak against my mouth. Its beak wedges past my lips and scrapes my teeth. The crow pushes its head into my mouth and I bite hard, tasting something foul. That is so incredibly disgusting. And you can feel the panic in this scene. And she comes out of the simulation freaking out. And there were times when I know Four cares about her, but there were times where I was like, you're not portraying what you're feeling very well, because right after she comes out of it, he's gonna walk her back to the dorm. Theoretically, this is a really nice thing of him to do. It's sweet, caring. He grabs my arm and hauls me out of the chair. There were so many times when he did stuff like that, I was like, Four, just be a little more gentle. She's not gonna understand. And he tells her that she got out of that simulation 3 times faster than the other initiates, and he doesn't really know it yet, or he hasn't said anything suspicious, that she knows that she was in a simulation and she was able to calm down because of that, and that's her advantage. Other people genuinely believe that they're in that situation and they don't have any knowledge that their physical body is actually sitting in a chair completely safe, and so that's why she's able to go so fast. And she asks him what was your first hallucination, and he doesn't say, he says it wasn't a what, it was a who. And she asks if he's over that fear, and he said not yet, and she's like, so they don't go away? He's like, sometimes they do. And I've always really liked this line where he was like, but becoming fearless isn't the point, that's impossible. It's learning how to control your fear and how to be free from it. That's the point. And he kind of explains what the simulations are meant to do. He's like, do you really run away screaming when you see crows? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, there's something deeper there. That your subconscious is just creating a situation to evoke that emotion. And for her, it's not being in control. And then they talk a little bit, and Tris confirms for us that Four was originally the first choice to get the government job after initiation. She says Eric was their second choice. And she's like, I can tell, basically, because the way he was acting at dinner the first night, jealous, even though he has what he wants. But she doesn't go further. She's like, he doesn't like personal questions, I'm just going to leave it. And then she said, this is one of my, I don't know what it is about this scene that I just absolutely love so much. I replay this scene genuinely every time I'm probably upset or crying or something like this. I replay this exact scene in my head. I don't know what it is. It's calming to me. I just really like it. And she says, do I look like I've been crying? He leans in close, narrowing his eyes like he's inspecting my face. A smile tugs at the corner of his mouth, even closer, so we would be breathing the same air if I could remember to breathe. No, Tris, he says. A more serious look replaces his smile as he adds, you look tough as nails. And I don't know why I love it. It's just, sometimes you have to repeat a phrase over and over to kind of control the emotions. And this one is mine. I would love to hear it if you have a scene or something from a book that you think about when you're upset or something like that, something that pulls you back together, because this one is definitely mine. fine. But I'm sure there's stuff like that in other books for other people. So obviously, it wasn't going to go unpunished that Tris beat Molly in a fight. And apparently, Molly went and told the Erudite like a fake story about Abnegation. And she says that Tris was talking in her sleep. She was telling her father to stop doing something, I don't know what it was, but it gave her nightmares. And Tris loses it. And she's like trying to fight Molly, and she's like, that's my father, you coward. Because that was a cowardly thing to do. Like, Tris, I think, honestly, would have taken the rematch. She hates Molly. And Will is kind of the voice of reason here, being from Erudite, and he says that she needs to calm down, and she's like, calm down, that's my family they're talking about, that's my faction. And Will's kind of the one to remind her, like, no, that's not. And that's why it's like, it's such a huge change for all the transfers. I feel like being like a Dauntless born or an Abnegation born going through initiation, it would be so almost easy. Well, maybe not Dauntless because intense, but with these transfers, they have such a hard time because it's like they gave up everything in one day, and then the people who were born in that same faction, like, they didn't give up anything. Maybe that's why they house them separately. They're just like, y'all are gonna go through a hard time, so we're just gonna seclude you over here. We get like a note from Tris where she says, at a glance, Al seems happy, but there's something heavy about even his smiles. I'm worried about him. And she should be. One of the saddest parts of the book, honestly, but we get to see drunk Four, which I always think is so funny. I had begun to think of Four as rigid, like a soldier, and forgot that he's also 18. And Will's like, instructor over there. And they talk a little bit, like, just Tris and Four are talking, but Will's like right in the background. I'm like, he can hear everything you're saying. And he says, you're not supposed to see me like this. And she was like, drunk? And he's like, yeah, well, real, I guess. And she's like, I'll pretend I didn't. And I just imagine, like, the scene is so funny. He's like, nice of you. He like says, you look good, Tris. Because she's looking her dauntless self. She just got a new tattoo. I think she's wearing the black dress at this point. And then that's when Al comes and like picks her up and says like, what was that about? And I'm like, Al, I don't think you can compete here. Will heard the whole exchange, so he's like about to make fun of her, but she's kind of like, not in front of Al. Because I think Will probably would have noticed too, so he kind of lets it go. We keep going through these simulations in stage 2, and at this point, like, it is made to sort of break them down a little mentally, and Tris says that, you know, everyone is like that. Even after they come out of these simulations, they're still going to have those nightmares. They're still going to remember these things. Like, they feel like real memories, even though they are simulations. This one, I hate this simulation. Like, it's so scary. She gets put in a glass box that starts to fill up, and she's going to drown. And in the simulation, she remembers, she's like, this isn't real. And she cracks the glass and falls out of it. And that's when Four is like, oh no. He says, like, you're Divergent. So he definitely knows what it is. And she's like, how does he know what it is? She goes and she talks to Tori about this. And Tori explains that her brother had been killed for being Divergent. But Tris is sort of thinking, like, how did Four know about this? Like, I think she automatically knows, like, she's not in trouble. Because Four is very different personality-wise from Eric and the other leaders of Dauntless. But she says how many people would know about this, about manipulating the simulations. And Tori says 2 kinds of people. People who want you dead, or people who have experienced it themselves, firsthand or secondhand, like me. And so that's when Tris kind of starts to theorize that Four is also Divergent. One of the saddest lines of the entire book. Tris is in another one of her simulations where she is held at gunpoint and ordered to shoot the rest of her family members. And she comes out of it and she's like, I know it isn't real. And he's like, you don't have to explain, like, that you miss your family. Like, I get it. Even though, like, he personally doesn't miss his dad, but it's not unreasonable that you want to see them. And she says the saddest thing ever. She's like, in the simulation is the only time I get to see them. And that is brutal. Like, that's so sad when you think about it. We get our rankings for stage 2. And this is when the trouble starts. Because Tris has been doing so well at these simulations, she's in the first slot. Seeing what happened to Edward, I would never sleep in the dorms again. Ever. I feel like she was pretty brave about the whole situation. Genuinely, you would never see me again outside of training. And then, like, it's so frustrating. This is what I mean about the friendships that she has. And I think maybe it's just because they're not mature friendships. Like, they've only known each other for a couple weeks max. But then Peter kind of, like, tells Will that Tris is manipulating people by looking weak but doing really well in the rankings. Because how else would she be getting through those simulations so quickly? And then Will asks her, he's like, is he right? Are you trying to manipulate us? And she's like, how would I do that? And I was like on her side with this, and I'm like, that is such an annoying question to ask, because what do you mean? Why would she be manipulating her friends? Like, it didn't make sense, and I was frustrated by that. But then, on the other end, Christina says, don't be an idiot, Will. She's not acting. When Tris is like, I'm not trying to act weak. And then that also rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, these are some messy friendships in this book. That's when Uriah finds her and he's like, somebody should be celebrating the fact that you're first. And so he and Marlene and Lynn, they're gonna go shoot a muffin off of Marlene's head. And I just thought it was so fun. Like, they're just like fun to be around. They bet each other that they couldn't do it, that Marlene couldn't stand still with a muffin on her head, and that Uriah couldn't shoot her with like a paintball or whatever it is. But they do. And she says, we both win. This is when some of the older kids come through, including Four, and they have like a moment in the hallway where they like kind of hold hands for briefly. And Four says that she belongs here. You belong here with us. It'll be over soon, so just hold on. And I'm like, that's easy to say from the other end. Like, I feel so bad for Tris during this entire like section of the book, because on top of trying to get into Dauntless, she's also kind of fighting with her friends. Not fighting, but just not in a good situation with them, and she doesn't know where she stands with Four. And I'm like, this is a lot of pressure. So much sympathy for her throughout this part of the book, especially when the next page over, she gets kidnapped. And, like, she knows it's Peter, and she's like, there's someone else here, and then there's a third person who's holding me. And she figures out it's Al by the scent of, like, the soap that he uses. And she says, the same smell surrounds Al's bunk. A weight drops into my stomach. Because, like, genuinely, that is so terrifying. Like, her so-called friend who liked her yesterday is now going to help kill her. She fights for her life, but, like, she's fighting against 3 guys her age, and she's already small. And so it's, like, almost no hope until Four shows up. He takes her back to his apartment, and kind of, like, she's unconscious for a little while. And then she wakes up, and Four says that the reason Al attacked her was because he wanted her to be the small, quiet girl from Abnegation. Your strength made him feel weak, and that's the only reason he attacked you. And I don't know if that really makes it better. And then Four says they won't be as jealous if you pretend to act weak. And she's like, you think I need to pretend to be vulnerable? And he says yes. And that's one thing I really like about Four's character throughout, like, the entire trilogy. He becomes more protective over Tris, but not in a way that underestimates what she's able to do and what she can endure. I feel like he really does have high expectations of her, which I like. I don't like it when the love interest just wants to, like, fully coddle and protect them all the time. And he says, like, you need to act weak, even if it's not necessarily, like, the right thing. And then he says, but please, when you see an opportunity. He presses his hand to my cheek, cold and strong, and tilts my head up so I have to look at him. His eyes glint. They look almost predatory. Ruin them. And then she says, you're a little scary, For. And he says, do me a favor and don't call me that. And then she says, what should I call you then? And he says, nothing yet. And I was like, what type of answer is that for? Like, you really need to, this was not your best plan. Like, what do you mean don't call him anything? But, you know, whatever. It's mysterious and attractive. And then Tris is about to go into the cafeteria because she's like, I can't stay here and hide. Right before she does, he asks about her injuries and stuff like that. And she says, like, her side only hurts when she breathes. And he's like, oh, you can't do anything about that. And she says, Peter would probably throw a party if I stopped breathing. Well, he says, I would only go if there was cake. She goes in, and it's like, finally her friends have some pity for her. Like, I don't know. I was just so frustrated with them. And she comes in, she's got all these bruises. Like, clearly she's been beaten half to death. And she says that it was Al who was involved. And then Drew comes walking in. I love this. Calling him bruised would be an understatement. She glances across the room at Four. He wears the satisfied smile I wish I had on. And it's funny because, like, her friends are like, did you do that? And she's like, no, someone else did. And she doesn't say anything about Four. Like, she's trying to kind of keep it on the DL. But her friends are finally like, okay, like, we're going to protect her now. And on top of that, I think this kind of entire situation is what kind of shook Christina a little bit and, like, made her realize that Tris wants to be a real friend to her. And she says that at Capture the Flag. She's like, I'm sorry that I got the flag and I didn't let you do it even though you earned it. And Tris says, let's forget about it. Even though Tris herself is like, I kind of don't want to forgive her for it, but, you know, we need to smooth it over. We need to move on. So she just does that. They're headed upstairs to go to the fear simulation room the first time. And Four turns around and walks backward a few steps, backward on a narrow path with no railing. How well does he know this place? He eyes Drew, who trudges at the back of the group and says, pick up the pace, Drew. Oh, it's so funny. Four sees Will with his arm around Tris, and she's like, is that jealousy I see? And I'm like, Four, it better not be jealousy. Like, I feel like it's so clear that Will likes Christina, but, you know, maybe not, I guess. And then they're talking about the fear simulation room, and Peter says that it's not fair. Like, if somebody goes through this fear simulation and they only have a couple fears versus someone who has 20, obviously it's going to take the person with 20 to go longer. And he says that's not their fault. And Four stares at him for a few seconds and then laughs. Do you really want to talk to me about what's fair? That I feel like Peter probably felt his entire heart drop into his stomach at that point. And Four says, I understand why you're worried, Peter. The events of last night certainly proved that you are a miserable coward. So now we all know that you're afraid of a short, skinny girl from Abnegation. His mouth curls in a smile. And I was like, I like that he's having fun with this. Like, because I feel like the entire time the instructor's like, obviously they're not supposed to have favorites, but can you imagine? Like, if you were an instructor, I would hate Peter like so much. Now, Al comes to talk to her, like they're in the dormitory again, and he's like, I want to talk to Tris, like he's trying to say he's sorry. And Tris says, stay away from me. And she knows that like her parents and Abnegation in general, they would want her to forgive him. She kind of feels bad, I guess, that she's not being forgiving. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this, because I mean, he tried to kill her the night before. I don't know if I would really be all that forgiving either, you know? I don't feel like in this moment Tris has anything to feel guilty about. And I know that Al jumps into the chasm after this. This is like, you know, the next scene. And that is it's a brutal scene, and it's a sad scene. And I know that to an extent Tris feels guilty. She's like, if I had forgiven him, would he not have done that? And I don't know. And Four even tells her that he doesn't know. Like, Al had a lot of hard stuff going on with initiation outside of Tris, but, you know, was that his tipping point or not? Nobody really knows. But at the same time, I was like, I don't feel like I don't know. Part of me is like, I feel like she didn't owe him forgiveness for that. Like, maybe I'm thinking too hard into it, but I have a really easy time falling into like her mindset in this book. Like I said, like this is one of the characters I've connected with the most ever in fiction. And so I really do feel like all of the emotions, and I didn't think she should feel guilty about that. And then it's like on the next page, does that change? And I think there's something there to be said about like, if it was the right decision for her to not forgive him, was it still the right decision the next day because of his actions? Like, does the effect that it have on someone else make the right or wrong decision different, like depending on the repercussions, I guess? I don't know if I'm like stating that correctly, but I think that's something that Tris is dealing with a lot in this book, where she's like, I'm making the right decision as far as Dauntless standards, I guess, in that way. And then at other times, she's like, I'm making the right decision by Abnegation standards. I'm making the right decision by Erudite standards. Like those type of things where she isn't sure what the right decision is, because the way it affects other people and the way it lives up to these different ideals, it's all different. And it makes it very hard for her to sometimes parse out what is the right way to go. They pull out Al, and it's like devastating. And one thing that the Dauntless do at funerals and stuff is drink heavily. And Tris turns the drink down, and Molly's like, once a stiff, always a stiff. And then she says, I read an interesting article today, something about your dad and the real reason you left your old faction. And I really liked this moment, just kind of like separate from the entire situation. She's like, defending myself isn't the most important thing on my mind, but it's the easiest one to address. And she turns around and punches Molly in the face. I'm like, she deserved it. Like, honestly, she deserved it. And then she runs into Four, and she's talking about what happened, and she's like, this would never have happened in Abnegation. Ever. None of it. Never. This place warped him and ruined him, and I don't care if saying that makes me a stiff. I don't care. And then Four says to be careful, and Tris is pissed when he says that. And it's not even Four's fault, because he knows the cameras are watching. He's like, you can't show like allegiance to your old faction right here. And she's just overall frustrated with him. And then she brings up the fact that he had sort of been like taunting her when she was standing in front of the target for Al. And then he clarifies, and he's like, because you're from Abnegation, he's like, the reason I did that was because I was reminding you that if you failed, someone else was going to take your place, because you're from Abnegation, and it's when you're acting selflessly that you are at your bravest. And he's telling her, like, leadership is watching you, and they care that you have that selfless impulse. He's like, you need to make it seem like that is going away, and that you're becoming dauntless. And she says, like, I don't understand why they care what I think as long as I'm acting how they want me to. And he says, you're doing that now. But what if, like, later on, the abnegation part of your brain makes you do something that the dauntless leaders don't want you to do? And then he's leaning real close to her right now. And at this point, she's like wishing that she was taller or whatever. If I was, he might not see me as a little sister he needs to protect. I don't want him to see me as his sister. I was like, Tris, honey, you need to figure this out. It took so long. And she's like, I might not need you to help me, because he's like saying that he was trying to help her. And she's like, I'm not weak. I can do this on my own. And this is another moment of just like, I know this is so random, but like the rhythm of the words, it just works so well with my brain in this book. He says, you think my first instinct is to protect you because you're small or a girl or a stiff, but you're wrong. And he says, my first instinct is to push you until you break just to see how hard I have to press, but I resist it. She says, why is that your first instinct, to want to like push me to see how far I can go? And he says, fear doesn't shut you down. It wakes you up. I've seen it. It's fascinating. fascinating. The Tumblr quote that was everywhere. And then she asks, if I had forgiven Al, do you think you would be here? And Four says that he doesn't know. And she says, I feel like it's my fault. And he says, it isn't your fault. And he's like, maybe there's more we all could have done, but we just have to let the guilt remind us to do better next time. And this is when she's like, guilt as a tool? That sounds exactly like my old faction. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's a line from a speech my dad gave. And she asks, what faction did you come from? And he says, it doesn't matter. This is where I am now, something you would do well to remember for yourself. He finally kisses her forehead, a cute little forehead kiss. And I'm like, Tris, does that clear it up for you? Tris gets her Abnegation tattoo, so now she has like Abnegation and Dauntless on her shoulders. And then I thought it was really nice. Christina and Will are with her, and they're throwing all of the reports from Erudite about Abnegation into the chasm. And Will is trying to explain the Erudite point of view, because he's like, Abnegation doesn't care about prosperity or comfort or things like that. He's like, but the other factions do, and like, because Abnegation is in charge, it's causing a lot of problems. And Tris is like, because giving an Erudite boy a car is more important than giving food to the factionless. And I love Christina. She's like, hey now, this is supposed to be a lighthearted session of symbolic document destruction. And then they're about to go to bed, but she sees Four headed up to the simulation room, and she's like, I'm gonna go see what he's up to. I need to ask him a question. And then when she gets there, he's like, are you gonna come in with me? And she's like, you would let me do that? And he's like, that's why I'm here. Like, he knew that she was gonna follow him. The fears were like, obviously, like, they're Four's biggest fears. So he is not doing well, but Tris is totally fine. She's like in this confinement thing, and she's like, let's make the space a little bit bigger. So she like curls into him and is like, it's almost a cuddle, except for the fact that Four is not doing okay. And she's like, arms around me. Obediently, he slips both arms around my waist. I smile at the wall. I am not enjoying this. I am not even a little bit. No. And it's really cute because she's like trying to talk him through it, basically. She's trying to get him to kind of slow his heartbeat, because that's how you get to the next obstacle. And he says, I can't really talk about it. He's talking about the fact that he was punished a lot as a kid and shoved into the closet. He's like, that's where this fear comes from. He's like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And she's like, I can talk. Ask me something. And he says, okay, why is your heart racing, Tris? And she's like, I barely know you and I'm crammed in a box. Which I didn't understand this question. Please let me know if you understood. Because Four then asks, if we were in your fear landscape, would I be in it? And she said, I'm not afraid of you. And he says, of course you're not, but that's not what I meant. And then I didn't understand. And at this point he laughs, and that breaks the simulation, basically, which I thought was really cute. But like, what did he mean? Would I be in your fear simulation? Like, does he mean, would she let him go through the simulation with her? Or like another type of fear, like fear of being in a relationship and stuff like that? Like, what was it? Like, I didn't understand, because after that he's just like grinning, and I'm like, Four, please let us in on the joke. We go through to the next fear where he has to kill someone. He's like, this one's not as bad. It's not like a panic. And then we get to the last one, and he's like, this is where you figure out who I am, basically, and what my name is. Because Marcus comes out, and Tris knows very well Marcus is like her dad's coworker, and that he had a son named Tobias. And so that's where she figures out the name. Simulation Marcus tries to beat Tobias with a belt, and so she wraps it around her own arm and like makes sure that it hits her instead of him, and then that breaks the simulation after that. I do think this might be the moment he actually falls in love with her. And then the whole thing stops, and there's only 4 fears, and she's like, oh, so that's where the nickname comes from. They go and they sit under the waterfall, and he says that he had 4 fears when he came in as an initiate, and he still has those 4 fears, and he hasn't managed to get through them yet. And then he says, I have a theory that selflessness and bravery aren't all that different. All your life you've been training to forget yourself, so when you're in danger it becomes your first instinct. I could belong in Abnegation just as easily. And this is after Four tells her that he got Abnegation as his test result too. And like, obviously he had to leave. He couldn't stay around Marcus anymore. But then when he says that, Tris is like, well, dang, like, maybe I don't belong in Abnegation at all. She's like, my first instinct is still self-preservation. And Four is like, you would just let someone else whip you instead of me. Like, what, where is the disconnect here? And then he's like, you were selfless in other times, like when Al needed somebody to stand in front of the target for him. You've been paying close attention. And then he's like, I like to observe people. And they've both made the joke that neither of them could make it in Candor, basically. And he says, fine, I watched you because I like you. And don't call me Four. He wants to hear his name again. And this was so funny. And she's like, but you're older than I am. He's like, yes, that whopping 2-year age gap really is insurmountable, isn't it? And then right after that, she talks about how she's like, I'm younger, I'm not pretty, like, I don't get why you like me. And then he says, fine, you're not pretty. And I was like, that would personally destroy me. If I made that joke, my significant other disagrees, what do you mean? They kiss for a while. It's very cute. We go to the next day and Christina's like, why are you so happy? And then Will says, let the girl be in a good mood. You may never see it again. And I was like, honestly, true. And then we go into training and Four doesn't even like look at her and she's like, what the heck? And I was like, obviously, Tris, like, he can't now flip the switch and just be all over, like, doting on you during training because that would look super suspicious. And we're talking to Lauren, is her name Lauren? The other trainer, and they're asking, like, we're gonna go into the fear landscape. They're gonna see some of Lauren's fears. And then they ask, how many fears do most people have? And I think she said, like, 10 is the average, 10 to 15. And they said, what's the lowest number? And she said, in recent years, 4. And obviously that's R4. Tris ends up going through, like, all of the initiates go through one of Lauren's fears just to, like, get a feel for how the room works and stuff like that. And she ends up getting Lauren's fear of being kidnapped. And I was like, this is almost not fair because, like, 2 days ago she got kidnapped and almost killed. And so even though she knows she's in a simulation, she, like, really loses it. And Four pulls her out and, like, yells at her in front of everybody. He says, get yourself together. This is pathetic. And, like, first of all, hurtful. He didn't have to say that. Second of all, she slaps him, which maybe she didn't have to do that either. But obviously it hurts more knowing that, like, they were hanging out last night and now he acts like he doesn't know her. She clearly has not figured out that she can't act like that. Like, they can't be a couple right now. And I think in this moment, Four was slightly overcompensating. So Tris decides to go on a field trip by herself, even though that's not allowed. And she goes to go see Caleb. He is not super welcoming. Like, he says that something is happening and that, like, you know, he starts to kind of trip over his own words a little bit. And he's like, you know, abnegation, like, we don't know exactly what they're doing and, like, if they're good or not. And she's kind of like, you know who our parents are. Like, obviously. Do you really think that they're corrupt? Like, causing issues in the government? And she even tells Caleb, like, some of these people here are lying. Like, just because they value intelligence and finding the truth doesn't actually mean that they're going to relay that truth in a way that is just plain. Like, they're going to be manipulating it. And then she brings up their mom, and she went to see Tris on visiting day. And Caleb is hurt because he's like, Mom went to go see you and not me. And she was like, oh, abnegation isn't allowed in Erudite. Or did they not tell you that? And I was like, oh, yeah, but, like, good point. Like, that was a very immediate example of what she's trying to explain to him. And then she says, like, Mom said to research the simulation serum. And then she's going to leave because she's annoyed at Caleb. But right when she's about to, a bunch of Erudite come up and they're like, come with us. And I was like, I think I would actually panic at that point. We go to see Janine and she was like, I'm interested in your test results. And I'm like, great. Obviously she knows. She doesn't know yet, but she has her suspicions. But she says that, you know, now twice the simulation serum has made you sick and we couldn't get your results. They had to be recorded manually. And she says it as a way of concern. Like, she's like, I am worried my experiment isn't working and I need to fix it. And, like, you're the person it doesn't work on, so I want to talk to you. But, like, clearly, like, Tris knows. And I feel like Janine is smart enough to at least, like, guess that Tris is divergent. So Tris tries to, like, put on a show at this point. And I was like, we've talked about how she's a bad liar over and over and over again in this book. Like, I don't know if we're going to be able to pull this off. So Tris acts like she hated being in Abnegation and that she's just, like, glad to be out of there. She wants to be Dauntless. And Janine's like, so I guess that you agree with the reports the Erudite are putting out about the Abnegation. And she says wholeheartedly, even though, like, she doesn't. And that at least lets us go for the time being. And then Eric's there when we get back. She could not get a break this day. Eric is there when we get back to the Dauntless compound. And he's like, you are not allowed to leave by yourself. This could affect your rankings. And he's like, or let's talk to the abnegation part of your brain. Maybe this will affect your friends' rankings. And she's like, well, like, yeah, you got me there. Like, Four comes in and helps save the day because she's, like, trying to figure out a reason for why she would go see Caleb that doesn't sound traitory or divergenty. And Four comes in and says, like, well, she tried to kiss me and she ran off because she was embarrassed. And Eric thinks that this is hilarious. So at least it takes the pressure off of him watching her so closely. Eric leaves. Four is like, you do realize the reason I yelled at you this morning is because I can't show favoritism. And she says, you didn't have to insult me just to prove a point. And he says that sometimes I forget that I can hurt you, that you are capable of being hurt. So this is another moment, like, I do like this perspective from Four. Like, he really does view her in such high regard, especially in, like, a Dauntless standard. And earlier in their fight, she's like, you can't be doting boyfriend 1 second and then, like, a mean trainer the next. And now he's like, did I hear you call me your boyfriend? And she's like, not exactly. Do you want me to? And it's so cute. And then she goes and sees Christina, and it's so upsetting because Christina and Will just had their first kiss, and Christina's over the moon. She's like, can't stop talking about it. And it's so funny because she's like, can you be a girl for a few seconds? And then she says that Will had kissed her, and then Tris starts freaking out. She's like, you are a girl. And it's so cute because they're just like, it's finally something happy that they can talk about. But then Tris can't reciprocate because she just kissed Four and she can't say anything about it. It's so frustrating. Four tells her to meet him on the train, and when she does, he explains that he found documents from Erudite that is like war plans. But we can't really do anything about that because the next day is our final stage of initiation. Tris is the very last person to go through her fear landscape. And this time, because like she doesn't have to hide the fact that she knows she's in a simulation, like this is a much better situation for her. And so she goes in and she has the birds again. And this time she realizes that the simulation is about making her feel powerless. And so for her to feel power, she ends up like imagining that there's a gun in the grass and then she can shoot the birds and stuff like that. This one is so creepy. And I feel like it came by power of suggestion because Lauren, when she was talking about her fear, she's like getting kidnapped by faceless men like in her room or whatever. And now the same thing is happening to Tris. She's in her room and then she sees in like the mirror at the window behind her that there's a man standing there. And first of all, it's the man from the original Aptitude test who had freaked her out, asking her to save him by like identifying a murderer or something like that. And now it's the same dude, which I'm like, oh man, like your brain is really working against you at this point. And then she says that the other ones are featureless, skin-covered skulls. And then they're like outside her room, and then she turns around and they're inside her room. I'm like, this is like that is so scary. And it gets worse because as they like pile into her room, she realizes they're kind of like chomping, sort of. And she's like, they have these needle-like teeth. Like, it's so creepy. It reminded me of the mutts that we see in Mockingjay, like that type of level. We get to the final one, which is always the worst one, where she's like told to kill her family members, even though they're telling her, like, simulation Caleb and her parents are there, and they're telling her like, it's okay, like you can do this. But then she remembers that Tobias was like, selflessness and bravery aren't that different, and so she turns her own like forehead right into the barrel of the gun, and like in her simulation she dies, and it's really scary. And then she realizes like Tobias goes through his fear landscape on a regular basis, and she said, it seemed like bravery to me before, but now it seems like masochism. And I'm like, yeah, this boy needs a therapist. Like, we have established that. We hang out with Four after all of the tests and stuff before we get the announcement of who made it into Dauntless, and he shows her his tattoos, and he has the Dauntless thing and then Abnegation and then the other three, and I was like, matching tattoos. Tris and Four both have Dauntless and Abnegation, and now she's kind of thinking about what job she wants after initiation, because like it's pretty clear she is going to make it in, but she's like, you know, I wouldn't want to work for the Dauntless leaders because they would figure out that she's Divergent really quickly and kill her. She goes and talks to her friends, and she like jokes about Christina being afraid of moths because that was definitely one of her fears in the fear simulation, and it's so cute. Terrifying. Will says with mock seriousness, that's my girl, tough as cotton balls. Tris ends up ranking first out of everyone, out of Dauntless Born and the transfer initiates. And it's at this moment that she ties everything together, and she's like, oh my gosh, after I came out of my fear simulation, they gave me an extra serum, and they've given every single Dauntless this serum today. The serum is going to have transmitters, because Four earlier was like, I just don't know how Erudite is going to use Dauntless as its army. Like, how are they going to get us all to fight together like that? But if Erudite made the serum and Max and Eric work with Erudite, like, that's where it's going to connect. Like, they're going to mind control the army. And Tris realizes this right as she's kissing Four after their announcements or whatever. It's so funny. She basically is like, I can't tell you what I just realized. And she's like, not with Will and Christina standing a foot away from me, staring with open mouths, probably because I just kissed Tobias. I'm like, yeah, that was kind of out of left field for you. The next day she wakes up and she realizes that everyone else is kind of moving around, moving in sync. And so she's going to have to play along and pretend that this serum is working in her. And we get into the train car, like going towards Abnegation. She kind of makes her way right next to Tobias. And it seems like he's also like fully blank, like just not there. And she's upset because she's like, oh, I thought he was Divergent. And then it's right then when he like grabs her hand and stuff. And we're like, Divergent team. And like, it's brutal. They're going to Abnegation and they're basically ordered to kill a lot of the Abnegation. And she sees Tori, because Tori's not Divergent. She sees Tori killing one of the Abnegation people. And then Eric, who's freaking annoying, comes up and like, obviously we're pretending to be asleep. And he sees Four and he pulls a gun. And he's like, do you think anyone would notice? Like if I just kill him? And I was like, are you serious? I understand. Like this, he very much is like the Peter of their initiate group, I assume. And that's when Tris acts like last moment. She's like, do not shoot him or I will shoot you. And so showing that she is Divergent. And Eric says, you won't shoot me. And I love this. She says, interesting theory. And then she shoots his foot. And then they take off, but they don't get far enough, fast enough. And Tris gets shot in the shoulder. They go meet with Janine. And she says, like, I thought, Tris, you might be Divergent. Did not catch 4, though. And it's because apparently he didn't even have to have his test results erased. And she's like, your divergence is just weaker. Because he could have belonged in Dauntless or Abnegation. I love Sassy Four. He says, your powers of deductive reasoning are stunning. Consider me odd. And then Janine says that most of the Divergent are actually from Abnegation, which, like, I don't really know, like, why that would be, I guess. And then Janine says that she's developed a new serum. She's like, I was hoping that this army serum that I gave everybody would get all the Divergents as well. Like, it would work on them too, but apparently not. And she's like, 4, you're gonna be my test subject. Tris, you're too injured. You're gonna get killed. And then Tobias, like, lunges across the desk and tries to choke Janine. I forgot that happened. They serum Tobias, and Janine says to let him up, and it's just so upsetting. Because as soon as the serum takes effect, Tobias looks at Tris, and she's, like, trying to reach him, and Janine is like, he doesn't know who you are. And I was like, that sucks. And then she gets thrown into a water tank, and she's like, I know I'm being, like, studied by the Erudite right now because they want to see if my real life reaction would match my simulation reaction. And I was like, obviously not. Like, what do you mean, would it match? Because Tris, she does try to break out of the thing, but she knows that she's not going to be able to break out of it the way she could in a simulation where she can kind of control that with her mind. And I was like, of course she's going to freak out. But she tries to, like, accept death, basically. She's like, I don't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her lose her mind scared. But at the last minute, her mom comes through the door and shoots at the water tank to get her out. And then her mom says, like, yes, I was Dauntless. The only reason I went to Abnegation was because her mom was a Dauntless leader and could, like, kind of cover her tracks. And she said, my mom said to get out of Dauntless. And that's why she chose Abnegation. And then she tells Tris where her dad and brother are. And then she's like, I love you, be brave. And then she runs off to be a distraction and gets shot. And then Tris, like, has to just keep moving to find her dad and her brother. The entire, like, last quarter of this book is just absolutely brutal, including having to kill Will, because she's on her way over there and she, like, finds one soldier and she's like, it's him or me. And I was like, is it? This is the part that I've always been like, I don't know. We won't know. And that's part of the torture of it. I was like, if she had shot him even in the stomach or something, like, I don't know, can you survive a bullet wound to the stomach? Like, maybe, or like the shoulder or something like that. Just something long enough to help her get away. But would Will have followed her because he was under the simulation? Like, we don't get to know these things, and that's the hard part. But she ends up killing Will, and I'm like, that is brutal. Because, like, you're gonna have to tell Christina at some point. Caleb, he's there, and he's, like, learned about this serum, and he's like, I left the Erudite. I'm factionless now. And their dad's like, no, you're not. You're with Abnegation. And Tris is like, I don't even know we're gonna have factions later. So it's just like, it's up in the air. And then Marcus is there, because of course he is. It's so annoying. She knows that Tobias got sent back to the, like, control room at Dauntless, and she's like, that's probably where they're controlling all of the rest of the Dauntless, so that's where we need to go. And she says that she doesn't get to choose the people who come with her on her mission. And they're getting onto the train, and at one point Tris sees, like, Marcus struggling. Oh, when they get off onto the roof, and she sees Marcus is, like, holding on by his elbows, and she says, somewhere inside me a vicious voice chants, fall, fall, fall. We run into Peter. Peter's like, you won't shoot me. And she says, people tend to overestimate my character. And then she shoots him in the arm. And then she wants Peter to tell where everyone is and where the simulation is running and stuff like that. And she says, another thing I can count on, Peter is not selfless. She's saying, like, I'm going to give you one more chance to tell me what I need, or I'm going to shoot you again. And he says, they're listening. If you don't kill me, they will. The only way I'm going to tell you is if you get me out of here and take me with you. And I was like, it's so annoying. Like, why do we have all the worst people with us? She makes Caleb stay behind. She can't really make her dad stay behind, so they go up. She's like, when did this become a suicide mission? Because she doesn't really necessarily expect to come back down from, like, the glass building in Dauntless. And it's so sad because, like, just, like, literally not even, I mean, it hasn't even been, like, a couple hours. And then her dad runs off to distract the Dauntless, and she, like, screams because she's like, that hallway is a dead end. And it's so horrible. And then we go into the control room, and Tobias is sitting there, but it's not Tobias. He's simulation dude. And then she's having to fight him, and she, like, when she says his name, she feels his grip, like, falter. And then she risks everything. And I'm not saying I would have made a different choice for her. Like, I get it, but I was like, both her mom and dad just sacrificed themselves to get her to this point, and then she just lets Tobias turn the gun on her. And she does it because she's like, this is gonna wake him up out of the simulation by realizing like his enemy would not do this. Like, why is this person doing this? And it's gonna kind of jog his memory. And she can't shoot him because she has not admitted to herself that she is in love with him. And he kind of shakes himself out of it. And when he does, like, it's so sad. She's like, I never thought I would see Tobias cry, because he comes out of it and he's like sobbing. And so he pulls the, I don't know, the hard drive out of the computer, whatever it is that's controlling the stuff. And she can see on these screens that they're like all over the city, that she can see what's happening. And she says that as people are waking up, they end up turning on each other. Like, the Dauntless end up turning on each other because they don't know what's going on. And they're kind of an attack now, ask questions later type of squad. So they just have to make it out of the Dauntless compound. And they do. And she's like, I forgot to tell him that Marcus is with us, because now we have the worst crew ever. Other than Four, we now have Marcus, who abused Four his entire childhood. We have Peter, who almost killed us. And we have Caleb, who, no offense, is just a little bit useless. And at this point, Pris kind of like puts herself between Tobias and Marcus. And she's like, the only reason I haven't killed you is because he deserves to kill you. But then Four is like, let's just get out of here. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, I'm sure, I don't think he wants to kill Marcus necessarily, but at the same time, like, he can't be cool with this situation either. And then when they're on the train to go to Amity, because they're going to kind of like take refuge there for a little bit, she's thinking about Christina, and she's like, Christina's going to find Will. And she's like, she's going to know, because she is, previously Candor, that I'm lying about like what happened there. And she's talking to Four at the very end, and she says that like her parents died, and she's like, they died for me. And she says like, that feels like it's important to say. And then Four says that to them, there was no better way to show that they loved her, because that was something she was worried about the entire book, was whether her parents still loved her. And then they, made that ultimate sacrifice for her. And I was glad we kind of had this like upswing in the conversation right before we end the book, where I will just read it to you. Enjoy story time. You nearly died today, he says. I almost shot you. Why didn't you shoot me, Tris? I couldn't do that, I say. It would have been like shooting myself. He looks pained and leans closer to me so his lips brush mine when he speaks. I have something to tell you, he says. I run my fingers along the tendons in his hand and look back at him. I might be in love with you, he smiles a little. I'm waiting until I'm sure to tell you, though. That's sensible of you, I say, smiling too. We should find some paper so you can make a list or a chart or something. I feel his laughter against my side, his nose sliding along my jaw, his lips pressing behind my ear. Maybe I'm already sure, he says, and I just don't want to frighten you. I laugh a little. Then you should know better. Fine, he says, then I love you. And she does not say it back, which is a little frustrating. But we kind of end the book with the idea that Abnegation and Dauntless are both kind of shattered factions right now, and Tris kind of doesn't know where that leaves her, because those were like her two homes, and we're on our way to Amity. And that's the book. I have been talking for a really, really long time. I can feel it in my voice. This always happens when I talk about a book I really like, and I just ramble here for like 2.5 hours. So if you made it to this point, thank you for sitting through my ramble. I hope you love this book as much as I do. I would love to hear your favorite parts, favorite lines. I would love to do like a movie reaction to the Dauntless movie. I'm just not sure how to do it. If you're a content creator and you know how, please let me know, because if I watch it on Prime and I screen record, then it won't pick up the audio, right? And so I don't know how exactly to do that. I will do some research, because I think it'd be fun for us to watch this together. Now I do like the movie, but at first I hated it, and I would love to review this all with you. I do have Maze Runner next up on my like to read list. Well, that and Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I think they're probably going to coincide a little bit, but I kind of want to read the rest of the trilogy. Like, I am ready to be hurt again. You know what I mean? But that's all I've got for today. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Caitlin. Thanks for watching. Bye. When I tell you that after I read these books in high school, I wore all black every single day for like months. This is what caused my combat boot phase.